Are you concerned about all this corruption being misgendered as conspiracies? Well, don't you worry. Sit back, relax, and join in the conversation as we talk with today's guest. Welcome to another LSB Film Productions podcast with your host, Chris Brooks.
Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I've got the wonderful Leonard Lawrence back on the show to talk about, well, pretty much where we left off really from the last time. Freemasons, mental health, corruption, you name it, we're going to hear about it. So welcome to the channel.
Yeah, hi.
Hiya. So where do we start then?
We'll start with a very quick refresher about myself. So
Okay.
anyone new, but in only a few minutes, then we'll get right into where we left off. Okay. My name is Leonard Lawrence. I was born in West London, close to London Heathrow Airport, a town called Southall in 1955. My parents moved in 72, 73 to Plymouth, and I joined the Royal Navy. I left the Royal Navy and eventually trained to be a commercial pilot, and I qualified in 88. I was fortunate to gain employment with British Aerospace based at Hatfield, where I flew commercial aircraft, the British Aerospace 125 and the British Aerospace 146. I eventually left and went on to join airlines where I flew the Boeing 757, 767, then I returned to flying executive jets. I flew VIPs like Prince Charles, Maggie Thatcher, the Irish Taoiseach. And the reason I'm saying that is so your viewers will understand that I was very, very closely monitored in all aspects of my life, including my mental health, because no one's going to let me loose with the future king, the Prime Minister, or the Irish Taoiseach without me being stable. Unfortunately, what I wasn't aware of, that I had suffered exposure to aircraft toxic cabin air. That is where oil enters the oil in the jet engines, the seals leak, and the oil in a vapor form enters the cabin because there's no filters. Those oils contain a substance known as tricresyl phosphate, which is an organophosphate, similar in nature to sarin, Novichok, that type of property. And I, along with colleagues, were all exposed to these chemicals when we had fume events. But what people don't realize, also passengers are exposed to them. And one fume event could cause you to have the same neurological damage I have. The case of aerotoxic, since I've spoken to you, has now been published, and it's been recognized in France as an industrial injury. So I'm not delusional. It's been proven in courts of law, and the cases can be shown. But in this country, very, very different. So what happened? I had started to suffer neurological problems with short-term memory, but it wasn't too bad. But it was causing problems. And I noticed a lot of the colleagues who I'd flown with at British Aerospace were also having similar problems. Theirs were slightly worse than mine because they'd had more exposure at the time. Anyway, my wife started to notice these problems of absent-mindedness, and she set about divorcing me. At a conference in London, it was Irwin Mitchell Solicitors with the all-party brain injury conference. It was said that 70% of those with acquired brain injury are divorced by their spouse, that is man or wife. And that's exactly what happened in my case. But it was quite spectacular. My wife tried to applied for an order that my children live with me rather than my wife. The children are written to me asking this, so I made an application to court. On the day of my during court, my house was raided by Thames Valley Police, and I was prevented from going to court. I'd been accused of indecent assault, sexual harassment, the theft of my wife's property, and eventually my wife said she'd done it deliberately to try and get me out of the house. But it caused me trauma. Mm-hmm. We've got to remember men do this to women as well, so it's not just it goes both ways. And I was traumatized, but I was also with this problem with my memory and feeling dizzy. I just couldn't work out what was going on. And my wife's barrister was very clever. He got me certified without a medical by a private psychiatrist called Dr. Jeremy Rise from Signet Healthcare. When an NHS psychiatrist from Buckinghamshire had written at the same time, my cognition was grossly intact. And all of a sudden, all my rights are taken away from me, and I had absolutely no control over my affairs. The barrister who did this was Dominic Brazil, 1 King's Bench Walk, Chambers, and he later admitted to his head of chambers, Richard Ainley, what he had done, that I was a court of protection patient when Brazil had placed hundreds of thousands of pounds on me. What I hadn't known, that I was passed to the official solicitor of the High Court, of the senior courts, and the solicitor in charge of my case was a solicitor called Helen Mary Clift. But what was never disclosed to me, that Helen Mary Clift had worked with my wife's lawyer, barrister, Dominic Brazil, prior to joining the official solicitor's office. So they completely sewed me up, and she agreed to everything he wanted, allowing him to put hundreds of thousands of pounds of costs on me. Then I got medicated to our lost capacity with sodium valproate, zopiclone, olanzapine, and I don't know what other drugs were given to me, and I was completely off the planet. During that period, Slough County Court, and with some assistance from Reading County Court, took just about everything I had. My house was sold, my savings disappeared, and effectively they put me on the street. Yet during this time, there was multiple court of protection certificates issued by psychiatrists for my safeguarding. They never got disclosed to the court of protection by the government legal services. And what they did, authentic court of protection certificates, which I'm going to send to you and others later after this program, were substituted for the official solicitor's own in-house certificates, and neither disclosed. So it was lawyers in the official solicitor's office who were making all the clinical and financial decisions on people like me and others when they weren't authorized. And this is what I've uncovered. And about 6 weeks before I uncovered all of this, 6 weeks after I uncovered it all, my house gets raided by Avon and Somerset police, and they weren't nice. So we're now going, that's my history effectively. That's what we covered last year. So since then, as you're aware, I've sent you a number of emails and kept you informed how I...
You have your own special folder.
Good. Well, a lot of other people have it because these systems are allegedly set up to safeguard us and protect us, when in fact, because of, I'll say, a minority of individuals, it doesn't work. And we end up losing our homes, we're put on our street, and more important, it puts a lot of young children at risk of being taken into care, and what happened to me happening to them, maybe a lot worse.
Can I ask, did anything happen to your ex-wife as a result of what she did?
Yes, she gained a lot of money. What she had done, they created a trust fund to hide all her assets from the divorce, and money was taken from me to repay loans from that trust to that trust, but we now know that trust didn't exist when all these loans were made. And my wife did very well, and she had stolen all my documents. But my focus is not so much on my wife. My focus is on her legal team, her solicitors, her barristers, because they are the ones who are ultimately responsible. They're the ones in court. They're part of our justice system. So rather than focus on my wife, I'll focus on the lawyers, because that is at the heart of it. But then, like I say, equally, it could have been a man doing this to his wife. But again, there's rules and regulations. But our lawyers, particularly Government Legal Services, which is headed by Susan McGibbon, the Treasury solicitor, and it is from her, who I'm advised by a senior barrister in the Treasury solicitors, this attack on me, accusing me of malicious communication, has come on her instructions. And all the pieces start to fit together, because there'd been times when I've been under attack by the Department of Works and Pensions on false allegations of not disclosing my pension. I now know that Susan McGibbon holds another role. In addition to being the Permanent Secretary Government Legal and head of the Treasury Solicitors, she has a role as Director General Legal for the DWP. So isn't it very easy for her to launch a DWP investigation on me? But she's been caught. They've all been caught. So we're going back now. My wife's lawyers had me sectioned, certified under the Mental Health Act without a medical. It took away all my rights. The certificate they use hadn't come from the Public Guardian Office. It's not in their format, as you will see. It's just basically a piece of A4 paper with the words Court of Protection at the top. Has no court seals, no embossed seals on it, but it was sufficient to hold me. Then I'm in this situation, I'm trapped, but like I say, the attack which I'm focusing now is the police. I'd found all this out, then on the 30th of March 2022, my house gets raided by Avon and Somerset police. And they weren't pleasant. They forced entry to my door. They came in. I was immediately arrested by a woman police constable. My computer was seized, my mobile phone was seized, and the house was searched. It lasted about 40 minutes. Then I was taken to Bridgewater Police Station, Avon and Somerset, because I have this brain injury and because I require EpiPens because I can lose my airway. A support worker came with me. He was present in the house. When I arrived at that police station, and this is what your viewers need to appreciate because it could happen to them, I was taken to the custody desk. I handed to the custody sergeant a brain injury identity card. And it's a very special one. It has the National Police Chief Council's logo in the bottom right-hand corner. And the card is approved by them. And I asked for a doctor, and I asked for the specialist brain injury lawyer. I was then taken down to the custody cells with an appropriate adult, and I was placed into a custody cell. The door was left open, guarded by the police. Then, after about 20 minutes, I was taken to the medical room where I saw a G4S, I now know it's a G4S nurse based in the police station. I refused to engage with her. I was fingerprinted. I was DNA tested. And it was a very hostile environment. I'd been refused access to my EpiPens, and also denied access at first to medication I require to keep my immune system in check. and to stop me having swellings to my throat. Anyway, I left there, and I now know that this nurse gave permission that I could be questioned by police. I was taken back to my cell with the appropriate adult. Again, door left open, and the door guarded by police. Then at my doorway, it wasn't a solicitor who appeared, it was two men. They were dressed in green and they looked like paramedics. But I now know they were not paramedics, they were mental health nurses.
Is this the situation that we spoke about on the last podcast, or is this another one?
Yeah, no, it is, right?
Oh, it is, okay.
Yeah, so it's a mental health nurse. It's just refreshing very
No, that's
quickly.
cool.
Then they set about causing a confrontation with me. Then a third mental health female arrived. Then for almost 2 hours, I was being goaded, provoked, antagonized. One of the mental health nurses removed my appropriate adult from me. So I was all on my own in this custody cell, being questioned by mental health nurses with the police there, and they enjoyed every minute abusing me. They were trying to get me to snap, to shout, so that they can section me. But I used a technique taught by a former army man, Jimmy Johnson, who runs veterans in prison. It's called break off. And what I did was step back and didn't engage with the confrontation as best as I can. And that is the best advice I can give your people listening today. Don't get involved in conflict or arguments or even talking to these people. Surprising, all the custody tapes go missing or destroyed after 4 weeks, erased. And there's no record of the names, the full names of the mental health nurses in the custody records and the times they gained access to me and they were speaking with me. All missing from the custody records. But we got the names of the two custody sergeants. So a jump ahead, I was released under investigation, but what I hadn't known, that whilst I was in the police station, the mental health nurses gained access to my medical records electronically. And even though I'd signed a dispensation that my medical records were not to be held on electronically, they gained access right back to about 1970. They had access to all my medical records, and I'm almost certain they shared them with the police in the station. So every one of you, whatever you say in confidence to your doctor, a nurse, or a healthcare professional, it's not in confidence.
No.
At any time it can be accessed and used against you. So that's one of the things that's come out and is going to require a lot more input. Now, I was eventually cleared of all the allegations, and I did receive a letter of apology. But these mental health nurses, they're in the Premier League. They went into my medical records. They accused me of everything, which you've seen, multiple threats against the public of anthrax, that I assaulted my wife and children. Whilst the police gave me no assistance to neutralise that, fortunately, the Crown Prosecution Service London intervened and wrote that they have no records after extensive searches of any assaults. But it just shows you how vicious these people are. Absolutely vicious. And over 120 people have accessed my medical records from this trust. I have the dates, the times, all their names on this document showing who they are.
I'll take it these mental health nurses weren't NHS mental health.
Yes, they are all NHS.
Are they?
Avon and Somerset NHS Foundation Trust staff.
Blimey. They sound more like they're almost privatised and hired by somebody with bad agendas.
Well, the three primary ones, 2 men and a female, they form part of what is known as mental health nurses who are tasked to work in police stations. But in my opinion, they've got too close to the police. They're too far too, and they were certainly not working in my interest. They were there to attack me, and never expecting that I would get my records. Now, fortunately, the Chief Medical Officer of Avon and Somerset, Dr. Daniel Marion, has blocked access to all people gaining access to my medical records, but it still needs to be explained why 120 people needs to get in there. A few were justified. Very interesting. One of the consultant psychiatrists who I was going to be put before was questioning, if Mr. Lawrence is so ill, why hasn't he seen a doctor in the last year? But he didn't know the full extent. But no, they were weaponized. So we jump back now, and we're going to the mental health system, which that's the background basically. How I came to meet you. Now, there is a court, and it is sometimes referred to as the most secretive court in the land. It was described that by Christopher Brooker, the late journalist for the Sunday Times and Private Eye. And it is called the Court of Protection. It's located in London, but there are satellite courts all around the country, UK, England and Wales, sorry. And you have what is known as ticketed Court of Protection judges. I think there's 3 tiers, tier 1, tier 2 and tier 3. Tier 1s would be district judges, tier 2 would be Crown Court judges, circuit judges, and tier 3 would be the High Court family judges. They do with the life or death cases. And no one's allowed to report unless there's permission. And the consequences of reporting what goes on in these cases are severe, imprisonment and or the seizure of all your assets. But what I found in my case was the judges who dealt with my case, and there was about 7 or 8 of them, Jones, Devlin, Yoxall, Chowdhury, all these judges, district judges, did not and had not held Court of Protection authorizations, but they were knowingly doing these cases and placing hundreds of thousands of pounds of cost orders on me. So we had the Court of Protection. Now, effectively, when someone gets certified under the Mental Health Act, a Court of Protection certificate is issued, and it should be maybe from the Public Guardian, and should be sent then to the Court of Protection. But the lawyers are not disclosing these to the Court of Protection. They're keeping them to themselves, sharing them amongst their colleagues, and sending them to the Office of the Official Solicitor of the Senior Court. And the Office of the Official Solicitor are there to represent people as a last resort. For instance, if no one will come forward and assist me, then the official solicitor steps in. But the reality to that, the official solicitor is often the first resort for lawyers, because they can hold you, and they don't disclose, in my case, they didn't disclose my Court of Protection certificates and other cases to the Court of Protection, and it was the internal lawyers who allowed their colleagues in private practice to go on a revenue gathering exercise to generate as much money as they can. In one hearing at Slough County Court, it lasted 10 minutes before District Judge John Fortgang. It was a Court of Protection hearing, and at the end of that 10-minute hearing, Fortgang placed a £10,000 cost order on me at the request of Barrister Dominic Brazil, 1 King's Bench Walk. But Fortgang was never a Court of Protection judge. He couldn't do the hearing. But I have the transcripts. That is why I'm such a threat to these people. And one of the men who came forward was Alistair Wilson, Clinical Director of Trauma, Royal London. He wasn't allowed to be my next of kin, nor was Dr. McGee, a military doctor, consultant anaesthetist. They just hold you and they take every penny from you. So that's the official solicitor. So what we then come across is all these professional bodies who allegedly are meant to protect you and investigate these people. We'll deal with briefly now with them all. The Bar Standards Board. At my time, it was headed by Dr. Vanessa Davis. She was the Bar Standards Board director. Sarah Downs, who's still there, but her name has changed because she got married, was I think the director of investigations, and their their advisor on vulnerable adults was a lady, I believe, Jane Renshaw from Four Paper Buildings. And the Bar Standards Board conducting investigations into 4 barristers, including Dominic Brazil, Nicholas Salin, KC, and Caroline Wilborn. And they, for not disclosing my Court of Protection certificates to the Court of Protection. And the Bar Standards Board Complaints Committee cleared them all. Recently, this was in around 2010-ish, recently I've gained a disclosure following a subject access request to the Bar Standards Board. The staff, a lot of the staff had changed, so they may not have been aware of the history, and this time they gave me the disclosure electronically and in hard copies. And it shows there that the Bar Standards Board director writes that the barristers were never questioned about why they hadn't disclosed my Court of Protection case as certificates to the Court of Protection, because the Bar Standards Board don't have the powers to question barristers. So that's why all the barristers got cleared.
What's the point in the bar standards then if they haven't got
that is exactly what we need to go forward and ask. They're not investigated, which they didn't. They knew I had actually had a meeting at the Bar Standards Board, and the Bar Standards Board director, Dr. Vanessa Davis and Sarah Downs, the head of investigation, and others all held my Court of Protection certificates in their hands. Yet they didn't question the barristers, and the Bar Standards Board Complaint Committee cleared them all because apparently they didn't have power to question them. Amazing.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. But not only that, Caroline Wilborn, One Garden Court Chambers, one of the ones who had held all my Court of Protection certificates, had written for legal advice to the Bar Standards Board what to do, because she refused to sign an affidavit to say that her submissions were correct. And she sits on the Bar Standards Board Complaints Committee. Well, she had. So had Nicholas Salin. So that's the Bar Standard. You're absolute wasting your time with these boards. But what they don't like is when you CC or BCC people into your correspondence with, because they're then accountable. But there's going to be many cases. Likewise, we now move to the Law Society's, the Solicitors Regulatory Authority. But in my case, the Solicitors Regulatory Authority had basically, again, whitewashed what had occurred to me. I appealed to the then Ombudsman, and I forget her name, but she directed the Law Society to reinvestigate, which is unusual. And they appointed a solicitor, and this solicitor was very good. Too good that they removed her from me. And the Bar Standards Board had appointed a retired judge, Mr. Rice, to help me, but he was removed because he was being too helpful. But we're on with the Law Society, and we called the solicitor Gillian, and she was amazing. She came out to see me, and she investigated, and she absolutely crucified the solicitors and barristers for what they did. I will publish her papers.
But has there been any repercussions on these people since?
Yeah, what happened? She was told to. She sent the report in and said how the law firm B.P. Collins had got me certified without a medical. I was a protected party and under the Court of Protection, and the investigation got shut down by a manager in their complaints department, Suki Gill, and by their director of diversity. The whole investigation got shut down and it went absolutely silent. Then I went to the General Medical Council. I think Anthony Omo, who's the director, about me being certified without a medical by a private psychiatrist, Dr. Jeremy Royce, and Signet Healthcare, Godden Green, with an NHS doctor, locum consultant psychiatry, said my cognition was grossly intact. What happened? Anthony Omo did nothing, and all the investigation got shut down. It's still in place. We're getting a pattern now, aren't we? Yeah. What I know is the government legal services, the then official solicitor, was writing to these bodies and having them shut down. His name was Alistair Babada. And May Morn, the deputy solicitor, shutting the investigations down. So we now go to the police, and there'd been an internal investigation review by Detective Inspector Nicholas Watts, Thames Valley Police. Detective Inspector Watts nailed it. He was brilliant, and he'd written in a report that I'd been certified by my wife's lawyers as a patient under Part 7 of the Mental Health Act and subject to the Court of Protection. But the lawyers hadn't disclosed this to the Court of Protection. And what happened? I was never shown that report by Detective Inspector Watts from Reading CID. I was told by the professional standards, Thames Valley Police, they didn't find any information. But again, thanks to a subject access request, I got Nicholas Watts' report, and they had no. So
what's the difference between a subject access and a freedom of information? Is it
okay? Subject access is your personal data. So if Chris wanted to see his medical records from an NHS trust, then he makes a subject access request to the data controller.
Okay.
If he wants his records from the police, he does a subject access request for his personal data to the police. So that's effectively or say, for instance, a local authority, social services, what they have on him. So he asks for a subject access request. If they refuse, then you can appeal to the Information Commissioner. They have about 28 days to do the disclosure. And I'd done one recently on the not so independent Office of Police Conduct. And after 6 months, they had not responded. And I made an application to the Information Commissioner. Then they did respond. And unfortunately, the documents they gave me, I shouldn't have had. And it shows that a Chief Superintendent, Claire Arms, Head of Operational Support at Avon and Somerset Police, was being investigated by her professional standards at Avon and Somerset Police. And there was a finding against Chief Superintendent Claire Arms of the obstruction of justice in my case. And what had happened, Arms was also in charge of all the surprise, surprise custody units where I was taken. And shortly after my arrest, she was transferred to the College of Policing, where she's presently based. So the whole, what's going on with these bodies now, to put the icing on the cake, I've received an email from the Independent Office of Police Conduct threatening me with legal action if I make any further emails to them.
Really?
But they're going to get one. So these are these professional bodies.
So I think I'm being profiled because I've got a LinkedIn page. Not that I ever really use. I don't think I've used it in like 2-3 years. But every now and then you'll get emails saying people have been looking at your profile, and one of those people I believe was the London police.
Oh, I can go better than that. I just checked my LinkedIn page, and it has a bit about what happened to me, Leonard Lawrence pilot. And I think I checked it about a week ago. there was 14 healthcare professionals had just accessed it. I think 4 people from City of London police had accessed it, and other police officers, Devon and Cornwall, Avon and Somerset, all involved in safeguarding roles in vulnerable adult and children. So yes, they are looking at me, but I've had some incredible good cops who have helped me, gone out their way to help me. They've come down to see me on Dartmoor. That was Thames Valley, Devon and Cornwall. The head of their, what was it, serious and organised crime unit, and one other came out and saw me. But what I now know from the disclosures I had, these detectives were being bullied. And that bullying was coming from much senior officers. And as I said to you before, if you're a man or a woman detective and you have a wife or husband, you have a mortgage, you have young children, your car loan, you can't step out of line. You have to be silenced because you'll lose your job. So that is where the problems rest. How can we
That whole control mechanism?
Yeah, and certainly in my case, these instructions were coming from a very senior level, around the rank of Deputy Chief Constable. In Thames Valley, the evidence which would have neutralised many of the recent allegations against me was withheld from me on the instructions of the then Chief Constable, John Campbell. He blocked all that input. Fortunately, the CPS stepped in. Now, of all the things that I've uncovered, we have an appeals process. So from a district judge, we'll go to a circuit judge, then from a circuit judge to the Court of Appeal. And I was given legal aid funding, which is unusual, to appeal by the Legal Services Commission, is special cases exemplary funding, as my case posed a substantial question to be answered by the Civil Court of Appeal and the non-disclosure of these Court of Protection certificates. A case had come before a judge called His Honour Judge Simon Oliver, based at Reading County Court. He's known to a lot of people, and it is the origins of this attack on me rest with him and his family. And Oliver had heard my case in April 2012. He had available to him the Court of Protection certificates. He had a full admission that I was a patient and subject to the Court of Protection, obtained from Deputy High Court Judge Richard Ainley, 1 King's Bench Walk, on the barrister Dominic Brazil, that Brazil had placed all these cost orders on me without disclosing. Oliver decided he would hear the case when he was not authorised. He had not held a Court of Protection case authorisation at that time. The hearing lasted an hour. He reserved judgment to the 30th of August 2012, and he dismissed my appeal when he weren't authorised to do this case. Neither did he forward the Court of Protection certificates to the Court of Protection. He held on to them. I have the transcript of that hearing, which is very interesting. And on that transcript, Brazil had admitted to Oliver that he had known Helen Cliff in the government legal department, where she had briefed him in all his private cases before she joined that office. So my appeal was dismissed. However, His Honour Judge Waller, who was a Court of Protection judge, instructed that the files be sent to the Court of Protection in the first instance, and an appeal started. Oliver didn't send the files to the Court of Protection, he hung on to them. Then Mrs. Justice Pawley, High Court Family Judge, designated judge for the Thames Valley, intervened. I got Simon Oliver's private emails, And he writes in February 2013, you can see him online, that the case in Lawrence has to go to Master Bancroft Rimmer in the Civil Court of Appeal. He prints that email off, so he's got a hard copy of it, not only the electronic, and in Reading, he writes instructions to Master Bancroft Rimmer that the appeal is refused. And of course, never expecting that I would obtain this. So we now have this question on how many occasions has this judge conducted court of protection cases when he weren't authorised, as long as with his district judges, then send instructions to the Court of Appeal, Master Mary Bancroft Rimmer, that the appeal fails. Now, there's another judge in the same department, Master Meacher. She had already told Simon Oliver that the Court of Appeal didn't have jurisdiction. It had to go to a High Court family judge. But he was having none of that, and he sent it to her. And
is this judge still in practice?
Oh yes, believe it or not, he's now been moved. Has been moved because of all the controversy which was going on in the Thames Valley area around Reading. In one case, he announced that he'd been appointed as the president of the Queen's Bench Division, or the by Mr. Justice Singer, to conduct a civil restraint order. And Simon Oliver's never been the president of the Queen's Bench Division, or now called the King's Bench. It was Sir Brian Leveson who was the president. And the transcripts of that hearing was sent to the Chief Constable of Avon and Somerset Police, Sarah Crewe, who's false arrested me. And the transcripts are there, what Oliver had said. But no, he stayed, he was at Reading for a number of years. And a website was formed called Judges Behaving Badly. Not all the comments on there may be correct, but certainly a number of them are. And that website only exists for because of the failure of these professional bodies to address cases. I think I made about 60, maybe more comments on that, as the police said when they interviewed me. But then if they've read all those, they will know exactly what's going on in that court.
Have you been accused of being vexatious yet?
I just feel, I think one of the civilian staff in charge as professionals came close, but they didn't. But it is a term often used, and
it's used a lot with the councils at the moment.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there was a man called Alan Dransfield, and the case arises from his actions, and he was labelled vexatious, and it has become very, very fashionable to use that term. But if someone's vexatious, then they need to evidence that. But it's used all too often to silence you. And when I do a subject access request, I quite often just write the reasons behind why I want that request, and to try and neutralize that that comment. But regarding to Oliver, he did all these cases, but there is a number of mothers who have been forced to leave the United Kingdom with their children. They've been absolutely persecuted, right? And they're living abroad, northern parts of Cyprus, in Europe, Thailand, outside of UK jurisdictions. And the Daily Telegraph and the Brooker reported on one of these cases, but they were silenced by a High Court family judge from reporting on this case. And the people who were witnesses for this mother, they got civil restraint orders from a High Court judge, the same High Court judge, family judge, who tried to silence the Metropolitan Police from investigating a child abuse case. But he did silence the Met Police. However, the Met appealed, and it was overturned by Lord Justice Peter Jackson. He named the judge. But yes, it was going on, and Oliver is now, he's been moved out of Reading because of the controversy. Thames Valley Police were absolutely, just trying to find the word. It was like hitting your head against a brick wall. What was interesting, detectives within that force took it upon themselves to contact me. Even those at the roundabout the rank as Superintendent Chief Super tell me where to look, what to do. But why couldn't they do, two even came and saw me, why couldn't they do it on the record? Because they were being shut down. And so we
Just
know.
quickly, sorry, just quickly, I just wanted to, for people watching this, vexatious, right? Somebody sent this to me, thought you might be interested in this entry from Foppingham Snoop's Ye Dictionary of Counsel, Nooth, 1747. Vexatious, noun, one who fails to agree with every single thing a counsel says, an utterer of discontent, someone that insists on calling out corruption or malfeasance, a disliker of stupidity, often called a whinger, a repugnant serf. There you go. That's what vexatious is.
Well, it was interesting in my case. Anyway, go back to Oliver. He's now in the London principal in the High Court in London, family division, conducting deprivation of liberty cases where basically he's putting people under the court of protection in care homes, where then their assets can be taken, the houses sold, and they can be basically left to rot or die. That's where he is now. Now, Freemasonry has been heavily involved with myself and Simon Oliver. He's a Freemason, so was I. So this whole issue about brotherly love was non-existent. So it split. And the worshipful master of my lodge wrote to the David Staples, the chief executive of English Freemason, about the conduct of Simon Oliver, and sending instructions that appeals to fail. And David Staples, the Grand Secretary, Chief Executive of English Freemasonry, put the safeguarding of the image of Freemasonry against the above that of the safeguarding of vulnerable adults, and particularly vulnerable children. And as a consequence, people in my Masonic lodge resigned from Freemasonry with sufficient numbers that the lodge can no longer continue. And the attack on me by evidence Somerset Police, there was a Freemasonry presence in that attack. I did receive an apology from one of the officers. So,
what degree masonry were you?
Oh, I'm right at the very bottom.
See, there's a big difference between
the
lower echelons of Freemasonry, and then once you get above the 33rd, completely different ball game.
It is, but unfortunately, they need members, and they're not. The members are leaving, and you'll see now online they're actually advertising to people to join. And the people are joining from the wrong reasons. It was quite hard to get into Freemasonry, and when I joined in the 80s, you had to go in front. I went in front of a panel of 5. They grilled you, lots of questions. So it was very select, and there was all these background checks. But now, Kenneth Noy was a Freemason, so it's not there. But the whole issue what I'm really focused on, when you're vulnerable, either as a mother, father, or young children, you are not protected. You are seen in a lot of ways, certainly to lawyers, as cash cows, where they can go ahead and grab all your assets. But the police, they are just not, at the senior levels, they are not investigated, and they're covering it all up. What they don't like is when people like me do their own investigation, often aided by old school cops, particularly those who are served in child protection and other things, and they're giving their time now, like Maggie Oliver, Clive Driscoll, John Wedger, to help victims of abuse. And this is why we pose such a threat. But regarding with subject access requests, so if you want your medical records, your social services records, your police records, go online and look for the subject access requests for each of those bodies. Effectively, you have to provide proof of your home address, like electric bill, gas bill, and you have to provide a photographic evidence of you, like a passport or driving license, something like that. Then there's no cost, you just do your subject access. If it comes back with large parts of it all blanked out, the words redacted, you can appeal for those redactions to be removed. Once you've appealed, if they reject that, then you can go to the Information Commissioner and ask him to intervene. And then he can review it, and you may then get the redactions. In my case with Avon and Somerset, they redacted a lot of information. I appealed, a little bit more was released, but not very much. It was then I went to the Information Commissioner, and the Director of Investigation, the Information Commissioner, Stephen, I think it was Ecclesey, he intervened, he accelerated it. But at the same time, the Calcott Guardian, that's the man who's in charge of your medical records within a trust, normally a senior medical officer, like a cardiologist, consultant's a cardiologist. They can also intervene. And in my case, in Avon and Somerset, the Calcott Guardian did intervene. Then I was given a substantive disclosure. Then we got to see, as you've been copied into, all of these allegations, and there's lots of them, but I've been addressing them all. I just got one more to do now. And then that's how you get hold of your subject access requests. The other thing is called a freedom of information request. Now, I've recently done one of them on, I think it's What Do You Know? I wanted to know the names of all of the Court of Protection judges in England and Wales. And it's dragged on and on and on. And I got an email from the Ministry of Justice, and they have said they don't have a list of all the Court of Protection judges in England and Wales.
It seems a bit sus.
It seems suspicious. And the question is, why don't they have a list? So how does a listing officer in a court know which case to list with which judge? So they have a list, I'm certain. The Judicial Appointments Office would know who's been appointed as Court of Protection, but they don't want me to have it. And one of the reasons they don't want me to have it is the two Court of Appeal masters in the Court of Appeal, Master Bancroft Rimmer and Master Sally Meacher, do not hold Court of Protection authorizations. Yet my case has been sent to them. Now,
really.
Vexatious. Am I vexatious? Well, the former Solicitor General, Lucy Fraser QC, when she was Solicitor General, her head of office, Tim, I think it was Tim, wrote to me and said, should you require Lucy's help, please let me know. But I didn't require Lucy Fraser Casey's help, because Sir Geoffrey Cox, who was then the former Attorney General for England and Wales, and my local MP, been absolutely brilliant. He holds all the Court of Protection certificates for safekeeping. He holds the letter from Richard Ainley QC with the full admission that I've been a patient and subject to the Court of Protection when Brazil had done this to me. But he holds it for safeguard, so if ever documents go missing, Mr. Cox, has got a copy. But Mr. Cox wrote to the Crown Prosecution Service, London, and he sought advice on the legislation that sets aside all judgments in my case without the need for the Court of Appeal. And the Crown Prosecution Service, in consultation with the Home Office and Ministry of Justice, wrote back to Sir Geoffrey Cox and provided Sir Geoffrey Cox the means for me to set aside all judgments in my case. Mr. Cox never thought I was vexatious. So yeah,
It's literally become a word like racist, doesn't it? Where they'll just throw anything at you to try and, like you said, to shut you down.
yeah, weaponized.
Yeah.
It's weaponized, and it's that has. But mental health now has gone one step, four stage further. Police come see the police got me into the mental health nurses couldn't come to my house unless there was something very serious. Maybe it's been alleged I threatened anthrax attacks, which I hadn't, and they wanted me in that police station not to see a solicitor. They wanted me to be detained with a mental health by the mental health. Fortunately, I had an appropriate adult with me. And they just set about me for almost 2 hours, and people won't know what it's like. You're there, you're in that cell, you've got mental health nurses attacking you, goading you, provoking you, winding you up. Some people are going to shout, some people's going to snap and strike out, and that's exactly what they wanted, but it didn't work. Then, because it couldn't work there, they went away. Then they got into my medical records and they made all of these allegations. Like I say, by some considerable margin, the most dangerous one was that I'd done multiple threats against the public of anthrax. Well, unknown to Avon and Somerset police, including Chief Constable Sarah Crew, for the 9 months before that force raided my house. I'd been safeguarded day and night by people, some of whom got many years service in the police. I'd also was in constant contact with the National Crime Agency, who surprisingly was very helpful, compassionate, and they've offered to release all the data which evidenced my communication with them for 9 months. And when I realised that I'd been accused of anthrax attack, that was also passed to the security services.
So surely there should be some liability there.
There is considerable liability, but you've got to remember, it traumatized me. I'm in my house now and I still see these people pushing through the front door, what they did. I'm looking through the police records. Why did the custody sergeants allow this to happen? Why was I denied access to a specialist brain injury lawyer that my Headway card says I require? I think I've copied you into that. Last Thursday, there was a meeting with Headway, and a representative from the National Police Chief Council attended that meeting over the failure of Avon and Somerset police to recognise that car. And so that outcome, which I now have, is very positive, but I can't say too much about it. Hopefully it will prevent Avon and Somerset and others what was done to me in their Bridgewater custody cell being done to other people.
So you are still based in Somerset?
I'm in Somerset at the moment, but I possibly might be moving in another 2 months. I've had about 6 different houses.
Oh, really?
One got burnt down, and
What, nefariously?
yeah, it was around about 2009. During the course of a week, a judge appointed by the Bar Standards Board had been to the house. A lawyer appointed by the Law Society had been to the house. Detectives from Devon and Cornwall Police had been to the house. Social Services had been to the house, all in a course of about a week.
Blimey.
To view documents, and at the end of the week, about 10:30 at night, the house caught fire. And because I had 2 German Shepherds, they detected something was going on. And we found that the loft was on fire. It was a thatched cottage. I think 80 firemen attended, and they didn't put a hose on it. They let the house burn.
Really?
Yeah, I got the photographs. The house
Blimey.
burned.
Do your poor care assistants do you have to pay them danger money?
No, they do all right, but they're very how can I say, they're very astute. They're more one I had for a number of years. She had worked for social services for about 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And she was very pleasant. They're very strict with me. I mean, as I said, I had to get my hair cut last week and, and have a wash every day.
How dare they?
Use the sheets every week. But there's lots of things. There's certain things that I can't do. And but I had over the current one I have is very sharp, and she was more than a handful for Avon and Somerset Police, more than a handful. But I just feel sorry for the people in my situation or others, especially those that are traumatized. And trauma can happen to anyone at any time, be it your child's died or child's been seriously injured. You're very weak, you're very vulnerable. And these people love to attack vulnerable people. And that's increasing all the time. And they swamp you with false allegations. And you then spend your life fighting these false allegations. I would have never have known what these mental health nurses are written. The Nursing and Midwifery Council, well, the Avon and Somerset Trust allegedly done an investigation into their mental health nurses, according to the corporate director, Phil Price. When I asked to see the details of that investigation, the subject access request, the trust said they can't find any record of any investigation. So it got whitewashed. When I went to the Nursing and Midwifery Council, after huffing and puffing, they eventually launched an investigation. But just by their attitude, you could see it was going nowhere. And I've asked the trust for a copy of what the Nursing and Midwifery Council looked at, because I gave them permission to look at my medical records and the entries. They never did that. They never even asked for the CCT body camera, and they whitewashed it. But when I asked the Nursing and Midwifery Council to focus on these anthrax allegations, they've gone very silent. They don't want to go down that route. But then they themselves are under investigation now. I think it was Sky News documentaries, and one of the independent newspaper has uncovered that over 20,000 patients in NHS psychiatric hospitals have been sexually abused, either patient to patient or patient with nurse. So the Nursing and Midwifery Council themselves are now under investigation, I think by 3 parties, into their non-recording of these crimes, these offences. So they're an absolute waste of time.
It's shocking to think of the severity of evilness that runs through our services.
Oh yeah, but then again in Norfolk and Suffolk, there's a lot of deaths in psychiatric hospitals, an unprecedented number, and they're not being addressed.
I have heard things like there's ritual killings. I don't know whether that's
a very sensitive area, because you go into an area called satanic ritual abuse, and it's an area those in authority don't like being investigated. But I believe there's certainly a document I gave the list of 10 successfully prosecuted satanic ritual abuse investigations. I have only a limited knowledge of that, but my main focus, keeping on track, is how these bodies, all these professional bodies, are not safeguarding the public. And we're being absolutely trashed. And our solicitors, our barristers, they may initially come with good intentions, but they get bullied, they get shut down. Why did my solicitors, Simpson Miller, based in Bristol and Leeds, why did they tell me that my Court of Appeal case application had failed, when in fact I got the certificates to show it had been successful? And in fact, I've also got a judgment which had been handed down by the former president of the family division, Gibson, showing that permission to appeal was not required under Part 7 of the Mental Health Act. So we've got judges doing these cases when they're not authorised. But like I say, only through these subject access requests and these occasional police files put in the post to me anonymously, which would be in my interest to see. Have I uncovered all what's happening? But there's so many of us. I think around about 2013, there was Lord Hardy, former senior law judge in the Lord Advocate or something in Scotland. He had been appointed as a chair of the Mental Capacity Act to review it. And what he published, Lord Andrew Hardy, in 2013, tens of thousands of people were being detained under the Mental Health Act. The safeguarding policies were not being followed. And in some cases, like mine, were being willfully disobeyed. So why have they got away with it for the past 11 years? Nothing's been done. Absolutely, our government has done absolutely nothing.
What do you think the driving force behind this is?
Money.
You think it all boils down to money?
Well, some of these people derive a lot of pleasure in inflicting suffering on people. And I ask you, what solicitor and barrister why do they enjoy when someone like me, who is incapable of legal discussion and understanding with an acquired brain injury, which is evidenced by the Southwest Regional Neurological Centre, who couldn't communicate, what pleasure do they get out of placing hundreds of thousands of pounds on that patient? All they're interested is your money, but they enjoy it. They absolutely adore it. And I say with Mr. Brazil, 10-minute hearing, Chris, £10,000. Then another hearing with Oliver lasting 10 minutes. He puts in a fee for lasting 1 hour. He puts in a fee for £10,000. It's, it's good money, Chris, for an hour. And that's what they do. They can make loads and loads of money. Again, doctors, psychiatrists, not all, but some, and certainly Dr. Royds, he had me because I had private health insurance. It was amazing to admit me to his hospital, keep me in there a month. He generated huge sums of money and equally large sums of money for writing psychiatric reports on my future when he didn't disclose in those psychiatric reports to the court that he'd issued court of protection certificates to safeguard me. And no one knows of them. So the judge didn't know because they weren't put in the trial bundle. But like I say, we're going to all these bodies and nothing's happening. There was a man, a chief superintendent, who was the head of the Chief Superintendents Association. I believe his name was Chief Superintendent Gavin Thomas. And he had actually published a number of years ago, maybe 5-6 years ago, that police officers who deal with vulnerable adults should be specially licensed. So like when you drive the police car, you're specially trained. When you take the police dog out, you're specially trained. So those police officers and detectives who deal with vulnerable adults should be specially trained and accountable to just sort of one person. So if it all goes wrong, then you know exactly where to point the blame. In my case, with Avon and Somerset Police, the detective inspector who was investigating Chief Superintendent Claire Arms and the detective superintendent in professional standards, they appear to have been good cops. They nailed it, but they were removed from the case and it was passed to civilians who basically stopped short of causing me a vexatious complainer, trashing me, and a vexatious complainer. So I wrote to the Police and Crime Commissioner, at the time it was Mark Shelford, and asked who does the head of Avon and Somerset Professional Standards report to? Jane Widmore. And it came back that she reported directly to the Deputy Chief Constable, Avon and Somerset Police, Nikki Watson. So she was the person who was in a position to shut down that investigation. And surprise, surprise, the chain of command, when I've now found it out, was Chief Superintendent Claire Arms to then Assistant Commissioner Will White and to Nikki Watson. My focus on Assistant Commissioner Will White was, why was the evidence which would have cleared me from all these allegations which have been made against me involving Judge Simon Oliver and his family, why was the email addresses and the IP addresses withheld from me that would immediately clear me from these investigations, from these allegations? And that is a question he needs to answer. But
do you think he'll get one?
Oh, we're going to ask him. But the person who he reported to was Nikki Watson. So it's all with Nikki Watson. But Nikki Watson's left Avon and Somerset Police. She'd been under investigation by the independent, not so independent Office of Police Conduct, who have just recently cleared her. But I'm not convinced by that organisation. Like, they threatened me with legal action if I correspond with them. So I will, because we need to bring this all out in the open. And say, tonight, you could have an accident, or your wife could have an accident, or you're put under the Court of Protection, which means all of a sudden the whole ball game changes, and it's not you or your wife who are controlling, it's them controlling your affairs and your financial affairs. Or if, for instance, you both had a car accident, you're both in hospital, you go under the Court of Protection, what happens to your children? What happens to your home? Your children could be put into care. Your relatives may not be allowed access to them because a Court of Protection judge says, no, they're going elsewhere. Your family can't afford to go to court because it could cost, they could get, well, like as in my case, a 10-minute hearing, a 10,000 cost order. Who can afford that? And so you and your wife are in hospital, you're in there for 6 months under the Court of Protection. Then all of a sudden you wake up and you and your wife come out the coma. Then where's your children? Oh, they've been put into care. What? You're asking, what about, can I go home? Oh no, your home's been sold by the Court of Protection and the money been put into court funds. No, oh, we think you've got delusion, you're mentally ill, and they can gag you, drug you, and you've lost everything.
That's so scary.
But it's reality. It is reality, but it could be stopped so quickly. If anyone like me, had I on my certificates, there's no serial number, there's no court stamps, no one knew they'd been issued. The Court of Protection hadn't known they'd been issued. The Public Guardian Office hadn't known they'd been issued. One of the trusts, Buckinghamshire NHS Foundation Trust, wrote to me. I've actually got the letter here. They're fully aware of the Court of Protection. They're fully aware of the Court of Protection order, but they never issued any Court of Protection medical certificates. They did. It was issued by Dr. Joseph Tony. So there's no audit trail. Where, as I said to you before, you buy a car, it's taxed, MOT'd, insured, police ARPN, they know where that car is. They know the whole history of that car. You get placed under the Mental Health Act. No one knows. And if the lawyers and some unscrupulous judges don't disclose that to the Court of Protection or Public Guardian Office, no one will know.
Terrible.
But it's the effects after, where they threaten you with civil restraint orders, extended civil restraint orders, threats of imprisonment, threats of the seizure of all your assets. Then you had the wider thing, the inland revenue start to attack you. In my case, the DWP attack you. They fine me, as I said, over £8,000. No rights of appeal. My benefit was stopped. I had to start paying so much a week to pay off that loan. The managers from the DWP rang me, said, Mr. Lawrence, you did disclose your pensions. We will do the appeal for you. these instructions came from the very top. Then they got it all set aside. We've got a list of all the people involved. What chance does your average viewer have when they're traumatized?
Mm-hmm.
And I had more than 11, I think it was around about 11 years under the Brain Injury Trust for neuro rehabilitation. And I had to, at one stage, I had to learn to walk again. I couldn't use my arms, I couldn't use my legs, my hands. So I got like a bike, which you put on a stand in the door, and eventually got to pedal. That built up my legs. Then I got like a punch bag and some weights from the dump and used that to build up the arm muscles. But more importantly, I had access. I had a good support worker. I had access to consultant neuropsychologists, psychologists who did home visits, and this lasted over. And across the support workers, I had over about 11 years of this. Yet overnight, all services of the Brain Injury Rehabilitation Trusts were withdrawn from the southwest of England. So no one's going to get that treatment like I did. And I was in London at Irwin Mitchell's recently at a conference, and I think there's only about 180 neuro rehabilitation beds in the whole of Greater London. And a maximum, I think you can stay there, is 6 months. So what chance do all these people have neurological problems? They don't. And it's all been cut back, cut back, cut back.
So it's horrendous. It really is. I mean, I'm in the process. I'm at this. I think I said on an email to you that I'm at the process of starting a documentary with somebody else called "The Betrayal of Human Rights,"
Yeah.
and it's going to focus on stories like yours, possibly include yours, and Danny, the farmer, and various other people. So for the people watching, I am going to put a GoFundMe link in there because we are trying to get support to get it off the ground, so to speak. But no, it's horrendous what goes on, and it's very scary, like you say, because it is a reality. It does happen to people, and I can't think of a more scary thought, especially when it involves kids, your children. Um, so yeah, it's about you. The message has to get out of
Yeah,
what
I
goes on.
I can remember an article written by a journalist in the Times, and when Alistair Barbardo became the official solicitor of the High Court, a man who's allegedly the last resort, I think it was in a very short period of time, over 622 parents were certified under the Mental Health Act as lacking mental capacity, and their children then faced adoption.
And it all stems down from the birth certificate, because if they didn't hold the birth certificate, it would be kidnap. But the minute you register something like a car, your child's birth, it then becomes governmental property in their eyes, which means that they think they can do whatever they want with that property,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, the problem when it happens to you, and going back to maybe my origins, you're traumatized. You get PTSD. And I was recently at a camp in Somerset. A man, an ex-paratrooper, and his wife have a small holding where they've set up a camp for veterans who suffer from PTSD. And if you've got nowhere to go or you're homeless, you can go there. There will always be hot food for you and somewhere for you to take shelter. And they're very kind people. And on I believe it was the 30th of March 2021, around 200 police from Thames Valley and Avon and Somerset, the two forces involved with me, raided this camp, and they included firearms officers. And when they raided the camp, they took great pleasure in causing damage, destroying the shower blocks, the doors, all the fencing around veterans' properties, including a motorhome. Oh, they had great fun. The man who lived there, ex-paratrooper, was brought out of the house at about 5:30 in the morning, made to lie on the floor in the freezing cold with these guns pointed at his head. But some sick individual, a firearms officer, I don't know yet whether it's even Somerset or Devon or Thames Valley firearms officer, the farmers, the freeholders, the man who owns the camp's daughter, she lives on the farm. Her little house got raided, and some individual decided it would be amusing to point a firearm with a red laser at the little child under two's head.
There's some sick
In
bastards.
the presence of its mother. Oh yeah, there are. They are so tough. Yeah. The man was arrested and his wife, they were taken to a police custody cell. I believe he had a heart attack in that custody cell, and it's left him traumatized. And I'm still traumatized over what was done to me. And they were eventually cleared of these the South East Regional, what was it called, anti-terrorist squad were involved. There's a lot I can't tell you. We've gathered a lot of information, but it was 1 year later that they raided my house, exactly the same day, 1 year later. But I was at that camp about 2 months ago. I was sat around a table, not drinking alcohol. We were drinking tea and coffee and something to eat. There was about 12 people with me. They were all veterans. Everyone had been arrested by Avon and Somerset police on charges ranging from murder, manslaughter, and terrorism. And it was me who was accused of terrorism, and everyone had been acquitted.
Did they get any compensation?
No, not yet.
Do you think they will?
Trouble with lawyers, from my own experience, some have their own agenda, others are susceptible to bullying, and if they start to represent people, then all of a sudden they may come under an investigation by their professional body. And then you will be thrown to the high ground and get cost orders, or some sick judge will put a massive cost order on you. And that's what's happening in our courts, but it can't go on for much longer. And it's beginning to catch up. But yeah, that's what they did in that thing. Yeah, all these guys, all acquitted, all traumatized. So I'm not just the only one, but there does seem to be a dislike towards veterans in this. It's certainly in Avon and Somerset.
I think it goes further than that. I think it's pretty much across the board.
Yeah.
With the lack of, you've got all these people coming over on their little boats, being put into 5-star hotels and whatnot, NHS dentistry call outs and stuff like that. And then you've got the veterans who have fought for the country, sleeping rough. It's horrendous.
Yeah, well, like I say, when I was in that custody cell, they knew I had a diagnosis of PTSD by Professor Turnbull. I'll tell you why Chief Constable Sarah Crew and her staff knew I had that, because they held one of my court of protection certificates in that custody centre. I've got it on court on their CCTV, and it was one issued by Professor Turnbull, CP2, giving me full mental capacity, and it goes into PTSD and traumatic events that I'd suffered, and they had their origins in the military. And how amusing to take me into a custody cell, then set 3 mental health nurses on me in the presence of police, smirking and enjoying everything and the custody sergeant.
It's just a sick game for them, isn't it?
Yeah, they don't like it until they get caught. And the custody sergeant, Sergeant Catlow, and Sergeant Moyes, I mean, they've got a lot of explaining to do.
But that's the trouble, though. Even when they are caught, there seems to be no real accountability.
Or they suddenly retire
Yeah.
their pension, and they go.
Mm.
These instructions to have done that to me came from a senior level. And as I now know, Chief Superintendent Claire Arms, Head of Operational Support, who was in charge of that custody unit, all the custody units, she'd have been referred to the IOPC for the obstruction of justice in my case. So what better to have me certified? But like I say, the woman I'm focused on was Nikki Watson, the head of Deputy Chief Constable, to who the professional standards reported to. And now I've received further disclosures from Avon and Somerset. A superintendent prior had been held personally responsible in 2013 for the recovery of these call to protection certificates, which he never did. But I said, we've caught him. But where it's only going to be documentaries like yourself, made by yourself, exposing this, is when it's going to start to come to the greater, to the greater masses. There is an organization called Citizens Commission on Human Rights, based in America, Los Angeles. I'll put you in contact with the executive director of England. They monitor it very carefully. They've offered me their services. They've offered to review all of the allegations, mental health allegations made against me, which I will eventually send them all to. But as you see, I've been working all through them. They are very good. They've got a good website. They've put up on their website, CCHR UK. If you go into their website, they've put up about me, what happened to me. They're very good. There's a man called Robert Whitaker. He wrote a book called Mad in America, and I've been given permission by him to use any extracts and copies from his book.
Oh, that's good.
And it's very interesting.
I'll have a look if I can find that book online. I'll put a link in the video description to it.
And what basically he goes in a little bit about how this all started in round about 1854. There was an act brought in called the Lunacy Act, and judges were appointed to administer that, and they were referred to online, you see it online, the Masters of Lunacy. So effectively, what we now have is the Court of Protection. And what Robert Whitaker wrote about was in sort of the late 18th century, men who wanted to trade their wife in for a younger model or someone else would go to a private psychiatrist and have their wife certified and put into the asylum so he could be rid of her. That effectively is what happened to me as a man in 2005. So it's got a long history. And anyone they want to shut down, if they wanted to shut down you suddenly get a mental health assessment by hired guns, and off you go out the way. But it's these little children, and they're so easy to take.
That is the scariest thing. But I hope and I believe I'm protected. I don't know. I'd like to think I'm protected by God.
There's a lot of veterans, especially those in special forces, who as children had been abused, and it gave them all the qualities possibly the army sought, i.e. they were angry. Of course, when they got older, they had a way of releasing that anger.
Problem, reaction, solution.
Yeah, my man Jimmy Johnson, who wrote the book Veterans in Break Off, and he writes, he runs Veterans in Prison. He said there's a large number of females now, military veterans, women entering prison, female prisons. And that's because they've been psyched up for action in, say, Iran, Iraq, places like that. And they come back and they're not desensitized and they're getting themselves into conflict. Well, you put a woman, rifle woman or into a prison cell, police arrest you. She's come back from Iraq. She's still hyped up. Then she starts to get confronted by mental health nurses. Chances are she's going to snap. She's going to engage and end up in a lot of trouble. But this whole scenario about how custody tapes are being erased. When you look at the seriousness, possibly the most serious was made by a mental health nurse who had never seen me. She wrote my medical, multiple threats against the public of anthrax. How do you cope with when I became aware of that, I thought, gosh, if anyone reads this, or it gets sent to the police or someone else, I'm going to get an anti-terrorist squad to raid my house. I'm likely to get shot like John de Menzies on the London Underground. The officer could stand trial for murder. I could probably be dead because some sick mental health nurse decided to write that on my medical records to cause me as much harm. Fortunately, like I say, the National Crime Agency were fully aware of it. The Director General, Graham Brigger, has the full report. I wrote to him what's done, and so does MI5. But it could be done to you, it could be done to anyone else.
So I have to say, and I think I said this on the last podcast, that although you've got this brain injury, you're so bloody astute and you're so, you come across so well, and the things that you've gone through and the things that you've been fighting for, you're stronger than most people that I know.
Yeah, but one of the things is I don't have anything to lose. They've taken most things from me.
Yeah, but even so, just the brain power and the.
But I've had a lot of training in my past. You've got to remember when I was a pilot with British Aerospace, whilst I wasn't a test pilot, the pilots I flew with were test pilots. Not only were they test pilots from the RAF and Royal Navy, they were instructors and examiners at the Empire Test Pilot thing. So I'd been in a very disciplined environment, very, very
Regiment.
Yeah, it was relaxed, but it was very regiment. But I always say to a lot of people, one of the skills I have, what a lot of younger people no longer have, they may be brilliant at computers, I'm not, but I was brought up on airfix models and mechanos, where I used to read instructions and put things together. That is a skill a lot of young people don't have.
Yeah, definitely. A more mechanical.
Yeah. So mechanically, I put these pieces together and I build on it. But I also get a lot of help. People, wide range of people, even people like you who help me, people who are maybe afraid to disclose things themselves, or maybe in the police force or some other thing, they help me. If I can't write an email or phrase it correctly, people will help me do that. So I do get a lot of help. But again, I had 11 years of neuro rehabilitation. No one gets that now. And I was having problems with speech. I couldn't talk properly. I've had all these, so I've had speech therapists, I've had neuropsychologists testing. One man, I say, a chartered psychologist, an expert on police abuse. He tests me regularly. He communicates with me, all for no charge, all free of charge. And people won't get that. And because of this PTSD, I get a lot of help from that. I mean, I spent a lot of time with Wing Commander Professor Turnbull, one of the world authorities on PTSD. The type of patients he dealt with was John McCarthy, Terry Waite from the Lebanon, Beirut. He dealt with the SAS guys who were caught and tortured in Iraq. A lot of people like that. Then I have, before that, when I'd had an incident with the police, I had Air Vice Marshal, consultant neuropsychologist, Patrick O'Connor, an amazing man, so astute. Then I still had a man associated with the Royal Navy. I can't name him, but he comes.
Do you reckon the other guy might be interested in doing a podcast with me to
No,
talk
they
about
they wouldn't be allowed.
No?
No, they wouldn't be allowed to. Sorry. If you ask questions,
it's not your fault.
I can tell you, but with trauma, then we will do, if we want to, a whole thing on trauma. I go into great detail with it, with photos. What saved me was I had 2 German Shepherds. When you're traumatized, there's very few people you can trust. You don't want to be in a busy environment. You need to be remote. Professor Turnbull wrote in one of his reports, I'd gone to live remotely. That's something what a lot of people with trauma do. And you go to live remotely. But the fact that I had 2 big German Shepherds, they were 100% dependent on me for their food, for their walks. But equally, I was dependent on them for safeguarding me, for giving me a structure. I couldn't lie in bed. They would have me up at 8 o'clock to go outside. They would want something to eat. They would want their walks, 3-4 walks a day, and a couple of miles. And what one of the dogs, Kira, suddenly I became aware of when I was having these neurological absences, not epilepsy, but I blank out for a couple of seconds or maybe a minute.
Well, like an absent seizure.
Yeah. When you come out of it, we were walking one day and I didn't have a clue where I was.
Really? So almost like sleepwalking.
Yeah, I'd lost where I was. And I said to the dog, home. And she knew exactly what way to go. And then she kept nuzzling into me between my legs and pushing my, and I think then she was picking up that I was going to have an absence.
Really?
That's how we
They're amazing, aren't they, dogs?
Yeah, they were amazing. And but she gave me that bond and that thing, and eventually I would maybe go down to a shop, but I would always go with the dog, and she wouldn't be separated from me. And the male, he was very good, but she was far more onto what was happening. So anyone with PTSD, an animal is good because you lose your trust in people. And when Wing Commander, Consultant Psychiatrist Professor Turnbull said I had to trust him, having been not nicely treated by about 5 others, it's a very, very hard thing to do.
It's a big ask.
But like I say, the first thing he did was stop all the drugs I was on: sodium valproate, olanzapine, zopiclone. We stopped it. My presentation alertness increased. Then we had to start this long structure and of a recovery. And I gave him 100% trust, and we worked through it. And there was only 2 psychologists he was allowed me near. And I've said this before. One was a lady called Julia. And one of the amazing things Julia did was to say to me, write a chronology. So the date, a brief description what had happened, then I'll send you an example of it. So your people who, if you're going to go into PTSD, they might like to do that themselves. And by showing that chronology, which ended up with about 300 entries, Professor Turnbull was immediately able to spot where the triggers were. And
very clever.
It's that simple. But I'll work with you. I'll send you that. But what was interesting with Professor Turnbull, he'd released me from the Mental Health Act, so and sent in a court of protection certificate to the government legal department, official solicitor, and they never told me that he'd signed the form and released me. They kept me until he found out, and I had to go to his office and collect one. Then I took that certificate to the public guardian office, court of protection. He said, "We don't know anything about you." Then we find out the official solicitor hadn't registered me. And there's others have had the same experience. I can send you a picture of one of them being evicted from his house. Nathan and Somerset played a key role in that. So that's what's going on.
You send me anything you want, mate, because with your permission, I could use some of it for this documentary.
I'm going to send you a court of protection certificate, the one issued by Dr. Royce, and then I will send you a part of an authentic one, right?
Okay.
I'll take responsibility for it. It go to you, it go to many others.
Mm-hmm.
You see the difference, how they're substituting court of protection certificates for their own certificates. Then eventually, I'm going to send you a photograph of that the court of protection certificate with PTSD that released me from the official solicitor, which was never sent to the court of protection. And I will then show you the form that the government legal services use to substitute the court of protection certificate with, and that goes into PTSD. Okay. Oh yeah, they've been called. That's why it was so keen to get me into a custody cell and get me certified. But it's out there now, and I mean, you had a lot of 3,000 within a week of your thing coming out. There was 3,000 hits and about 150 comments. And like I say, it's not only me that's happening. One of the comments was from a lady, and she said that her husband had tried to have her held under the Mental Health Act so he could divorce her and take all her money and become her guardian, our trustee. But she said it didn't work because her previous husband had done that. So it's happening. It's happening.
It is. And
it's got to stop.
It has definitely got to stop. Unfortunately, so is the podcast now, because we're nearly at 2 hours.
Right.
I would happily have you on again.
Yeah, we will. We'll work
a trauma-based one.
Yeah, they do a PTSD. I get a lot of stuff to do with that, some pictures, but alcohol's not going to cure PTSD, right?
No.
Magic
mushrooms.
No. Alcohol's drugs. They're not going to deal with it. You need to get the right person, and they're not easy to find. Then you've got to work through it. But the first thing you can do is a chronology. So I'm going to I'll send you a little extract of my chronology to show people how to lay it out and set it out and start to work through it and find the triggers.
Okay. Well, if you're able to do that sooner rather than later,
I'll do it.
I will add it to this podcast.
Yeah. Okay. I'll try and do that sooner then.
All right, mate. Well, listen, I hope everyone watching this has been blown away by it, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed listening to it. I could listen to this man for ages, but unfortunately, it's just time restraints which prevents me from carrying on. But for now, thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye for now.